Hello and welcome back to Building Skills and Paving Pathways, a podcast series brought to you by NTU CAO Office, featuring NTU alumni and relevant skills for your own career. On this episode, we are joined by a former teacher and a Jobs-Skills Analyst at SkillsFuture, Darryl Leong. Hi, Darryl.
Hi, hello.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. This is the only podcast that's recorded on Zoom, but a special one nonetheless, right? Because we have a very relevant background to discuss on skills. I would say, we're discussing offline. You were a teacher for several years, and now you are helping people get jobs, transition. So you have kind of seen the whole spectrum in a way.
Yes, I have. Yeah, in some ways, yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's get straight into it, right? Outline today, we're going to talk about Darryl's background, how he got into teaching, just a bit of insights into education. And then we're going to discuss some relevant job trends, skills that are useful for you to develop. Okay, yeah. So let's get into it. I know you did a degree in English.
Yeah,
right?
I did.
And, English. But what led you into teaching initially?
When I embarked on my degree, which was in English, right?
Yeah.
That was because at that point in time, I was really in love in literature, and I just wanted to, pursue my passion, which was in literature. And upon graduation, I wanted to share my love for literature with others as well. And I thought teaching was one of these platforms that allowed me to do so.
Okay.
And so when I embarked on my teaching career, I wanted to, I could help change the mindsets of students so that, even if they don't end up loving literature as much as I do, at least they grow up not hating it, right? So that was something that I wanted to achieve. And I hoped I achieved that in those years I was in teaching.
Sure. I enjoyed literature actually. Oh, great. Yeah, that's great to hear that. I want to ask, right, do you have a focus as an educator, right? Do you have a certain intention or focus or outcomes that you wanted to leave your students with?
And I think as a teacher, what I wanted, apart from changing the mindsets of students, it was also very much to help them and develop them in the areas of critical thinking and creative thinking. Because when it comes to literature, right, the way you read a text, the way you respond to a text, it's anyone's game. You can do it in whichever way you want to, so long as your analysis is grounded in evidence, right? And you are able to communicate your ideas clearly. And I think that's good enough, right? So this critical thinking, this creative thinking, this communication skill, these are things that I wanted to develop in my students. And I think beyond these skills itself, right, it's also an appreciation of perhaps a diversity of views, because there are many different ways to respond to a text or a poem, prose or whatever, right? And it's not to say that, my view is correct and your view is wrong, right? And I think there's this negotiation of ideas, this bouncing off ideas, this discussion that I do a lot in class that allows, hopefully, my students to appreciate that, in life, we don't always agree with one another, right? There's always this differing views that everybody have. And I think, hopefully through my classes, I taught my students, how to appreciate this kind of diversity of views, how to negotiate them, how to think critically about issues, how to perhaps maybe even respond to issues in a creative way, and eventually, communicate their ideas in clearly.
Okay, that's great, right? Critical thinking is one of the skills, creativity, that we discussed in previous episodes. So you all can also check that out. I think the playlist will be below. How relevant is formal education in getting a career? So you've been in that system for a while. What are some gaps you noticed that you hope to be filled?
I think one of the things we need to be very clear about is that these days, when we look at a career, the definition of a career is very, very different from how most people would think it is or how it's been in the past. I mean, in the past, when we talk about a career, it's something like you go into a job and you work that job for life, or you work in a company, or you work in an industry and you work in it for life. or maybe even you hold a certain position and you hold it for life. But that's not the case anymore. Or, careers are no longer linear. These days, we tend to talk about people having multiple careers or things like a portfolio career, where they move into different jobs or different industries, or take on different roles in their lifetime. Sometimes they move up, sometimes they have to take a step back before they move up again, or sometimes they move up and then they transfer laterally and then they move up and down again. So it's no longer that kind of a linear career that we used to see in the past. And it's no longer, you perform one task or one role forever. So that's something that we need to take note of first. And then if we want to talk about how education supports that, or how formal education can lead to that, I think that's where we need to also have this kind of a mindset change, because it's no longer the case where you study a certain field and then you end up working in that field. Because as we know, a lot of graduates do not work in the field that they actually study in, right? So if we want to talk about how relevant formal education is to a career, I don't think we should look at it from a binary point of view, whether it's relevant, irrelevant. Formal education does have its uses. Most employers at this point in time still see formal education as a signal of the kind of a background or the kind of skills that a graduate has. So for example, if I graduate in computer science, then as an employer, I'll see that this person has computer science skills, right? And therefore, if my role requires someone with computer science skills, I can employ this person with this kind of a background. But that's not to say that somebody who studied perhaps arts like me, but along the way in the course of my work, I do computer science stuff, I do data analytics stuff, or I take up certain courses here and there. And therefore, I also have those kinds of skills. And in fact, jobs these days are no longer defined by the job role itself. Sorry, the job title itself. These days, jobs are more and more defined by the roles. So, and that's because these days in companies, right, people tend to do work that are cross-discipline or maybe even cross-function or cross-teams. And so so it requires that employees or the fresh grads or whoever will have the skills not just in their area, but also in areas of in other areas, so that they are able to work with different departments, to work on certain projects that require them to, cross-apply their skills and all that.
Right. So in a way, formal education gives you the foundation, right? Yes, it gives the foundation, but also, as you were saying, I think offline we discussed how you would hope that students be made aware that education is, giving you the foundation, but it's a lot more than that. It does not fully prepare you for the workforce, and in a way, taking that step out of their comfort zone, at least giving that awareness that this is what it is, right? Rather than perhaps, and I totally agree and I relate to that in the sense that this wasn't really told to us when we were in school, that this is the foundation, or at least the purpose of education. So the purpose of education wasn't really adequately expounded and expanded to us. And I feel like if, for example, whatever you're sharing now, hopefully is being shared to more students nowadays so that they're aware that this is the trends they're working towards. I think this is a good transition, right? Just very briefly before we talk about work trends, relevant skills, right? Especially now as an analyst, right? Briefly share with us how you made the transition from a teacher to your current work. What drove it and the course that you took while teaching?
So what happened was I was a teacher for close to 8 years. I was teaching during the pandemic, where we had to suddenly, very quickly and overnight change to home-based learning and stuff like that. And it was very shocking. It was very challenging for a lot of us, because we were doing things that we weren't doing. And suddenly we had to change everything. Right. And it was also during the pandemic when we were all, having that circuit breaker and staying at home, and we can't go out. And then as I read the news, I noticed and many people are losing their jobs, right? Because borders are closed,
Mm.
industries are closed, and all that. And one sector that that really worried me a lot was this education sector. In
Mm.
other countries, teachers were losing their jobs.
Okay.
And I thought that was really shocking because in Singapore, as a teacher in Singapore, my job is safe because
Right.
I'm a public servant. It's a rather safe job, right? We call it the iron rice bowl
Yeah.
or something like that. But in other countries, that's not the case. With funding cuts, school closures, teachers lose their job.
Mm.
And then I read about how some of these teachers have to go on and take certain other jobs like becoming a driver or working in a pub or something like that.
Right.
And that's only because they are a teacher, but they don't have other skills or qualifications to help
Mm.
them pivot into something else.
Mm.
And that got me worried because I'm in Singapore, my job is safe. But if I were in their shoes,
Yeah.
I'm doomed because I was looking at myself, reevaluating my skills and my knowledge and my qualification. And I realized that I don't have much apart from teaching.
Mm.
So that got me worried. And I thought, okay, since we're now, in that circuit breaker moment and we don't have much time, we don't have much opportunities to go out. So why not I take up a course that is conducted online, and in my free time, perhaps I pick up some skills um, and see if I can, apply those skills in
Sure.
my job as well. So that was the initial aim, and that was what I did. So I took up a specialist diploma in business and data analytics.
Yeah.
And and as I was learning all these new skills, I was seeing how I could apply them in my work, and I found that it was really, really meaningful. And the more I did it, the more interested I got in this field. And that's when I decided maybe having taught for a certain number of years and me being still young enough, why don't I try something new? And then eventually, if I want to come back to teaching, I can always do so. But I come back with that kind of wealth of experience and
Right.
wealth of knowledge of various industries out there. And I hope that would help my students.
Sure. That's amazing, right? Having that growth mindset, we talk about a lot in schools now, right? To actually take the extra time to learn a new skill, step out of your comfort zone. Not many people will be willing to do that. And it's like, it's not as if it's simple to pick up, right? I think you were saying that it was a steep learning curve for you because it's a completely different data analytics, it's a new skill set. But you use that and you eventually combine your love for education, and eventually SkillsFuture is kind of a natural way, a pathway to go. So yeah, I mean, we learned, okay, SkillsFuture, I think we've heard about it in one way or the other. Recently, there's a lot of attention, right? But maybe we talk about what your role is and what SkillsFuture is intended to do in society so that people have some context. Yeah.
I think when we first started out, SkillsFuture was sort of like a funding authority, because when people wanted to do courses, or when training providers wanted to provide courses, it's like, oh, okay, let's have some government grants, and we need some grants to do these, right? So the government was like, okay, let's put up a national authority, a statutory board that helps to give out these kind of grants. So that was how SkillsFuture seemed to have started out. But we actually do a lot more than that. We want to move away from this image of us being a funding authority to more of a skills authority. So we are the ones who also look at the job market in Singapore and look at the skills profile of our workers. And we try to see where are the gaps, where are the trends, how are industry changing? What are the skills needed to meet these changes, right? And we try to work with our stakeholders, the different government agencies, the various training providers, and we tell them these are the trends and these are the skills gaps that our people have. Can we mount courses so that our people can also pick up these kind of skills so that they are more relevant, they stay relevant, they are able to pivot, and so on and so forth. So we also do that. And my role as a job skills analyst, in particular, my department, we analyze a lot of these labor market data, and then we develop what we call job skills insights, which are insights into the labor market, what some of the trends are, what are some of these skills gaps for the various industries, or what we call the economies. And then we communicate our insights to various stakeholders like government agencies, sector agencies, training providers, and we also do public engagement. So we conduct webinars for various organizations and to the public as well. So these are some of the jobs, some of the roles that I do.
Okay, which makes you very exposed to market trends, right? Like you said, the gaps, right? So I think this is super relevant for us to discuss, right? What are some current and future work trends graduates or incoming graduates need to be mindful of? I know we briefly talked about how it's slash career, right? Multiple careers. But aside from that, or elaborated, is there anything else?
Apart from the jobs of the future that I talked about,
Yeah.
how job roles are changing, how employers are employing people nowadays, how all these are changing. I think that another thing that I'd like to talk about is how these days we cannot see a uni education or a poly education as the ending or the finish line. Nowadays, we don't just have or we cannot see it as like, oh, my learning pathway ends at poly uni.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's my career. I don't need to learn anymore. Actually, that's not the case nowadays, right? In fact, nowadays, we should see these two paths as overlapping. In fact, someone's career may not necessarily start immediately after graduation. Someone's career could actually have started before graduation, because this person may have started on internships, and the internships eventually lead to a job, right? So the internship should also be seen as part of one's career. So actually it overlaps with the time of study. But along the way, even as you start your job, you may need to continue learning, because you need to learn things that are job specific. You need to learn the tools, the systems that your company uses. And these are what we call micro learning, because then you have small learning. It doesn't necessarily lead to a degree or something. You may have certain qualifications or certain certifications that you may have to go for along the way. So these are micro learning. And so we should see one's working career and one's learning career or pathway overlapping, and in fact maybe even running in tandem together until one retires.
Yeah, I was going to say that having the expectation helps, right? Because it's the expectation that prepares us or kills us in a way. Because if you're not, then you have this fantasy that, hey, I'm entitled to work when I graduate. And then when you realize that that's not the case, right? Then you get into a state of sometimes victimization as well, which is not very healthy. Like, even for myself, I realized that as an entrepreneur, I cannot stay stagnant, right? There are so many different things I got to pick up along the way. And I think it's not just relevant for entrepreneurs, but really because now we're kind of intrapreneurs, right? We are also innovating within our own companies, taking on different skill set roles, like you mentioned, and those that have that ability to kind of take on those hats will stand a better chance of creating revenue and thus being paid better. Of course, fulfillment is something that we have to take into account when we talk about that, not just the money. But that's a very good transition into the next question, which is what skills are relevant for uni student develop outside their course of study, I would say.
Well, I don't want to pigeonhole certain students and spotlight certain skills, and and then people say, oh, it's only these few skills that are needed and some of the skills are not needed. But what I would say is we shouldn't say, like just basically randomly pick up like 10 skills and say all these skills are must have. I don't think that's the case. More importantly, or one way to look at it is look at the trends in the industry. So see where the industry is moving towards. For example, there's a lot of this thing called the Industry 4.0 transformation, where a lot of factories are moving towards automation, digitalization. So we should look at the trends, or we can look at things like the green economy, right? There's a lot of greening efforts going around, right? This whole word green is so popular these days. And what does it mean, right? So if we look at these kinds of industry trends, this kind of society trends, then you can see what are some of the complementary skills that are needed. So I wouldn't say, there are X, Y, Z kind of skills that you must have, but I would say, look at the trends, look at where the industry is going, look at the kind of skills needed to support those trends, and look at what skills you have and what skills you may not have. And then you go and see what skills you may not have. Maybe you need to upskill, maybe you need to pick up new skills, maybe you need to top up certain skills. And I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
So for example, if I'm take for example myself, right? I did a degree in arts, and if I want to go into policy work that requires certain data skills, like right now as a job skills analyst, right? So if I were to transition into policy work, I think that's not too difficult, right? From an arts background to policy work, that's quite okay. But if I want to do policy work that requires data analytics as well, then that's where I need to top up this kind of skills, right? So that's where I picked up data analytics skills so that I can take on this role. So I wouldn't say, there are A, B, C, X, Y, Z kind of skills, but look at the trends, look at what the job roles need, right? Look at what employers are looking for, and then you evaluate, you see where you are, where you need to be, and then you go and look at what skills you need to top up and so on.
How do people do that? Because it's not something we do. At least most uni students, I don't think they do that, right? But how, if I'm listening to this and my uni student, how can I begin to do that?
Yeah, I mean, as a uni student, I mean, I'm sure your universities will have that education career guidance office with a lot of the counselors, right? I'm sure NTU
go and check it out.
I'm sure NTU ECG counselors do a very good job in helping uni students do this kind of thing, right? Where they see where you want to be and help you, analyze your skills gap and point you to the correct courses or the correct places to go and pick out all these courses. But more than that, right? We also do not just look at uni students, right?
Sure.
As part of our work, we also look at people who are currently working, people who are working for quite some time. And so we come up with all these webinars or job skills insights, and we communicate them to the public. So you can always watch out for them on our website and all that. And also, you can look at Careers Connect or some of these career counseling and career coaching services that are provided free of charge, by the way, on WSG Workforce Singapore.
I'll link it up, no worries. I'll link all the relevant links up in the descriptions in the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify, you can head to the YouTube channel to check it out.
And I'll send some of these to you as well. Yeah, you can look up for all these. So people who currently working or who have just recently graduated and realize, I don't know what to do, I am quite lost. Well, you can always look up for some of these, right? And there are all these experienced career practitioners, HR practitioners, and what you call these people in the industry can coach you on these, right? And can give you certain guidance on some of these. So it's not to say that the government is not supporting. There are actually many of such platforms for people to seek help.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I think last question I would say before the final Q&A is, what are some ways to overcome the challenges of picking up new skills, right? I think you have also analyzed the challenges, the barriers of people picking up new skills. What are some of these barriers? Okay, and how can one, have the mindset or get the help to overcome these barriers?
So I think one of the things that I did, I'm just speaking from experience, right? I just, plunged myself into this new field, and I was telling myself, well, if I manage to pick up some skills, I do manage to pick up some skills. If I don't, well, it's fine as well, because what's the worst that could have happened? You could say I wasted 1 year, I wasted some money. In fact, I didn't waste any money because my entire course fee was paid for using my SkillsFuture credit.
I see.
So I mean, what I was thinking was, if I give myself 1 year, if in 1 year I manage to pick up skills, great, I pick up skills. If I don't pick up skills at the end of 1 year, it's still 1 year. Whether or not I pick up skills after 1 year, it's still 1 year, right? So not much difference. So I gave myself that chance. I wanted to give myself that chance and see how far I could go with it. Thankfully, I was able to pick up the skills. But what allowed me to do so are some of these things. Perhaps if I were to speak from SkillsFuture point of view again, we have this thing called critical core skills, or what we call critical core skills, or what some people call soft skills. And some of these critical core skills, or CCS, one of which was learning agility, which means having these kinds of learning habits, or the ability to switch from learning in one field to learning in a different field. And I think that helped me, because then I draw upon the way I learned things in the past, the way I picked up new skills along the way, in the course of my career and all that. And I tried to apply that in this different field, right? So that was one thing that I was able to use. Or something else like digital fluency. Increasingly, we are using a lot of IT or ICT in our teaching, and that also helped me in picking up these kinds of data skills, right? Because I was able to do things like Google, solutions for myself, watch YouTube channels, YouTube videos to pick up certain skills that helped me along the way. So so these are some of the skills or some of the soft skills that I applied that allowed me to pick up these new skills in the data.
I love it. We discussed a lot about soft skills in our other episodes, like resilience. Learning agility was one as well, right? Interpersonal communication, be able to work with people is quite crucial as well in the relational world. So again, if this episode connects with you, do consider checking out the rest of it as well. If this is the episode you're watching, after watching the rest, share it with someone, your friends or so, who can actually benefit from it. Because I wish I heard this when I was a bit younger as well as a student. I think it would be very helpful to me. Okay, great, Darryl. I think we've come to the end. There's just last 5 quick fire questions. Okay, we do this for every guest on the show. Okay, just some short answers now to the questions. Okay, so the first question is, what is the biggest value or lesson you gain out of university?
I think it's the network of friends that I made. So as an art student, I had to take classes in science and so on. And I think through taking all these classes, through working in group projects and all, you make friends. And I think that network of friends you make in university is really, really helpful and very, very valuable in life.
I love it. Okay, next question is, what is the biggest failure in your working career and how do you overcome it?
I think the biggest failure, so to speak, was getting too comfortable in my job. It's not wrong to say that you love your job and you wish to do it forever. If there are people like that, by all means, right? Because then you get better at it all the time. But what I felt was not so good for me as a young person who just started on his career was getting too comfortable in my job, because that kind of comfort leads to what is known as complacency. And I think that was not so good, because then I would think that I'm okay in my job forever, I don't have to worry. But that's not the case, because as a teacher, as we all saw, suddenly when there was COVID, we all had to pivot to other ways of doing things. And we all found that we all couldn't do it immediately. It was a steep learning curve. It was very challenging. And I think that really got me wondering, right? Am I adequate? And I think that's something that I learned along the way, that actually getting too comfortable and not doing anything along the way to pick up new skills, continuously learn and all that, I think that's very, very dangerous.
What is one blunt but useful advice you've got?
Just be yourself. whether or not it offends people, just be yourself. Just be unapologetically yourself. Because at the end of the day, when people see that you are your true self, you are sincere, you are genuine, I think people will appreciate you more, even if some people do not quite like you at first, but they, eventually people will see that this person is just being themselves. And I think people will value you for who you are. And if it's a place that doesn't value you for who you are, just pack your bags and go to another place, because I'm sure people who have listened to this talk are those who will pick up a lot of skills along the way, and you'll be fine.
Okay. What is one quote or philosophy you live by that inspires you or guides you?
A quote or philosophy, I think it's, what Steve Jobs said, something about insanity and doing great things, right? Like you need a bit of insanity in order to do great things. And I think that's the case, because if you're just like everybody else, then you're not going to do anything exceptional, right?
Yeah.
You always need to bring that extra spark, the extra X factor to the team. Yeah.
Okay, love it. Last one. What's one final message you want to share with NTU students?
Well, as much as we talked about picking up skills that are all relevant and all that, I do at the end of the day also want us to not to forget to pursue our passions. And I think that's something that is very, very important. No matter what, you should always follow your passion. But nowadays, you just have to be mindful that even as you follow your passions, you need to pick up complementary skills so that you can continue doing what you love. Otherwise, doing what you love on its own is not going to be enough. But that's not to say do not do that, right? You still do that.
Yeah.
And I hope people, still follow their passion and all.
Got it. Thank you so much, Darryl, for this time you spent. I think I learned a lot, and I'm also very encouraged to go out there and learn. It's like my love for learning has come out again, and I think it's something that both of us can agree on is really important in our lives, just that joy of learning, right, in itself. So with that, we've come to the end of this episode. Do subscribe and share for the later episodes as well. And of course, this is sponsored by CAO office, so you all can check them out. Like what Darryl mentioned, they do provide free services and you guys pay for it, especially if you're in NTU or in any university, there will be an office there. So go and talk to them and see how they can help you in your career. All right, with that, we'll see you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.